The night was thick with mist, a pale moon casting eerie silver beams over the dense forest. The trees, tall and ancient, whispered secrets in the wind. Beneath their canopy, a lonely cabin stood, its wooden walls worn by time and weather. Inside, Ethan and his wife Lillian sat by the fire, their newborn son, Oliver, sleeping soundly in a crib beside them. Ethan had inherited the cabin from his grandfather, a reclusive man with a peculiar fear of the woods. The locals in the nearby town often spoke of strange occurrences in these parts, of voices calling out in the dark, of eyes watching from the treetops. But Ethan, a man of reason, dismissed them as folklore, tales meant to scare off outsiders. That night, however, something changed. A long, sorrowful howl echoed through the trees, shattering the stillness. It wasn't the usual call of a lone wolf. It was pleading, almost human. Ethan stiffened, his gaze meeting Lillian's across the room. Another howl followed, then another. Soon the eerie cries surrounded the cabin. Lillian clutched Ethan's arm. They sound desperate. Ethan stood, his heart pounding. I need to see what's out there. He grabbed the flashlight and cautiously stepped outside. The cold air bit into his skin as he scanned the tree line. Then he saw them, wolves, a whole pack of them, their eyes glowing like amber lanterns in the darkness. But they weren't aggressive. They were huddled together, their ears flat, their bodies tense. Then, the largest among them, a massive, silver-furred alpha, did something unimaginable. It stepped forward and bowed its head. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The animal was begging. He turned to call for Lillian, but before he could, a low, guttural whisper drifted from the trees. Don't let them in. Ethan spun around, shining his flashlight toward the sound, but the forest remained empty. The wolves whimpered, shifting anxiously, their gazes darting toward the darkness beyond them. They weren't the threat. Something else was. A rustling sound came from deep within the woods, a slow, deliberate movement. The wolves bristled, their eyes no longer on Ethan but on something behind him. Then, a voice. Soft. Familiar. Ethan. Please. He felt ice grip his spine. The voice belonged to his grandfather. But that was impossible. His grandfather had died years ago. Lillian called from inside, panic in her voice. Ethan, get in here, now! Snapping out of his daze, Ethan turned and ran into the cabin, slamming the door behind him. Lillian was clutching Oliver, her face pale as she pointed toward the window. Ethan followed her gaze, and his stomach twisted. A figure stood just beyond the trees, too tall, too thin. Its face was shrouded in darkness, but its head tilted in an unnatural, jerking motion. Then, as if sensing their gaze, it raised a skeletal hand and pointed directly at the cabin. The howling wolves broke into a frenzied panic, barking and snapping, their fear tangible. Then, without warning, they turned and fled. A slow, hollow tapping echoed from the window. Tap, tap, tap. The figure had moved closer. Lillian gripped Ethan's arm, her breath shallow. What is that? Ethan didn't answer. He couldn't. Then, the whisper came again, seeping through the cracks of the wooden walls. Let me in. Oliver stirred in his crib, whimpering in his sleep. The air inside the cabin grew heavy, thick with something unseen, something watching. Ethan swallowed hard. We need to leave, now. He grabbed the car keys, but as he reached for the door, a shadow slithered across the floor beneath it, long, twisted fingers dragging themselves closer. Lillian screamed. The door burst open, and everything went black. Darkness swallowed Ethan as the force behind the door sent him sprawling to the floor. Lillian's scream cut through the silence, and Oliver's cries filled the air. The room flickered with the dim glow of the dying fire, casting long, twisted shadows against the walls. Ethan scrambled to his feet, his breath ragged. The door, it hadn't just opened, it had been wrenched apart. Jagged splinters clung to the frame as if something massive had pushed its way in. But there was nothing there. No figure, no footsteps. Just the cold, creeping presence that filled the air like thick fog. Lillian clutched Oliver tightly, her knuckles white. "Ethan," she whispered, voice shaking. "I saw it. It was—" A long, guttural growl cut her off. Ethan turned toward the open door, his heart hammering. Outside, the wolves had returned, but this time they weren't pleading. They were snarling, fangs bared, eyes locked onto something unseen inside the cabin. Then, the whisper came again, slithering through the walls like a living thing. "You shouldn't have stayed." Ethan's blood turned to ice. He turned, expecting to see the figure from before, but instead, the shadows in the room began to stretch, unnatural, writhing. They pooled in the corners, twisting like living ink. Then, something moved. A shape unfolded from the darkness, tall, impossibly thin. Its limbs cracked as it straightened, a jagged, unnatural thing that barely resembled a person. Its face was wrong, hollow where eyes should have been, its mouth too wide, filled with needle-like teeth. Ethan staggered back, shoving Lillian behind him. The firelight flickered, casting warped reflections on the thing's smooth, shadowy skin. It lifted a long, clawed finger and pointed at Oliver. Lillian clutched the baby tighter, shaking her head. "No, please." The thing's voice came in fragments, layered, as if many voices spoke at once. "Give him back." Ethan's stomach twisted. "Back?" Lillian sobbed. "Ethan, I didn't tell you everything." The creature took a slow, jerking step forward. The walls of the cabin groaned, as if the very wood rebelled against its presence. The wolves outside howled furiously, their bodies pressed low to the ground, waiting for something, ready to attack. Ethan turned to Lillian, his pulse thundering in his ears. "Tell me. Now." Tears streamed down her face. "Oliver, he was never meant to be ours." The room spun. The creature took another step, its head tilting sharply. Ethan's voice cracked. "What are you saying?" Lillian squeezed her eyes shut. "The night I found out I couldn't have children, I was desperate. I went to a woman in town. She said she could help." Her breath hitched. "She told me about the old ways. A ritual, a trade." Ethan felt his stomach drop. "Lillian, what did you do?" Her lips trembled. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I was supposed to offer something in return." The thing in the shadows exhaled a deep, rattling breath. The air grew colder, thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. Lillian clutched Oliver tighter. "But I didn't. I took him, and now they've come for him." Ethan's mind reeled. The wolves weren't warning them about the thing in the woods. They were warning them about Oliver. This wasn't just a haunting. This was a claim. The fire flickered, dimming, as the creature took another step. "Return. What was stolen?" Lillian sobbed. "He's our baby!" The wolves outside suddenly lunged, their bodies crashing through the open doorway. Teeth and claws met shadow, snarls filling the air as they attacked the thing that had stepped into their world. The creature recoiled, hissing, its form flickering. The wolves weren't just attacking, they were driving it back. Ethan didn't hesitate. He grabbed Lillian's hand and ran. They burst into the night, the cold wind slapping against their skin as they sprinted toward the truck. Behind them, the growls and shrieks twisted together in a terrible symphony of rage and pain. Ethan fumbled for the keys, his hands shaking. "Get in!" Lillian slid into the passenger seat, still holding Oliver, her breaths ragged. Ethan turned the ignition. The truck roared to life. Then, a silence so deep it pressed against their eardrums. Ethan's eyes flickered to the rearview mirror. The cabin stood motionless, the fire inside flickering against the broken walls. The wolves were gone. The thing was gone. But the forest wasn't right. The trees had shifted, twisted, their trunks gnarled in unnatural shapes, as if something had passed through them that did not belong in this world. Then, a soft whisper from the back seat. Not from Oliver, not from Lillian, right behind Ethan's ear. "You cannot run forever." His blood froze. He turned. Blackness. Ethan's vision swam in darkness. The voice, the sickly whisper that had curled around his ear, still echoed in his mind. A cold weight pressed against his chest, suffocating, pulling him down into something deep, something unseen. Then, a sharp gasp. Ethan's eyes snapped open. He was still in the truck, his hands clutching the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles had gone white. The engine was still running, the headlights cutting through the dense, moonlit forest. Lillian sat beside him, holding Oliver close, her face frozen in terror. The whisper was gone. But something had changed. The trees, they no longer stood tall and familiar. Their shapes were wrong, twisted, unnatural. They loomed over the truck like skeletal figures, their bark blackened and cracked as if burned from the inside out. Ethan's breath came in short, ragged bursts. "Lillian." She turned to him slowly, eyes wide, hollow. "Ethan." The road. He looked forward. The dirt path that had always led back to town was gone. Instead, an endless stretch of trees stood before them, thick and unyielding. The path had been swallowed, erased. They were trapped. Ethan slammed the truck into reverse, tires kicking up dirt and leaves. The vehicle lurched backward, but after only a few feet, thud. The truck shuddered to a violent stop, as if it had hit something solid. But there was nothing there. No tree, no rock. Just an invisible wall of force keeping them contained. A sound rose in the distance. Not the wolves, not the wind. It was laughter, low, guttural, seeping through the trees like a sickness. Lillian whimpered, her grip on Oliver tightening. "Ethan, what do we do?" Ethan's mind raced. They couldn't go forward, they couldn't go back, and something was circling them, watching, waiting. He exhaled sharply, forcing himself to think. The wolves, they were protecting us before. He turned to Lillian. "We need to find them." Lillian's voice trembled. "And what if they're gone?" Ethan hesitated. The laughter in the woods grew louder. Then, suddenly, Oliver giggled. The unnatural sound sent ice through Ethan's veins. It wasn't the sweet laugh of a baby. It was distorted, layered, wrong. Lillian gasped and looked down at him, her face twisting in horror. "Ethan!" His eyes... Ethan turned and felt his stomach drop. Oliver's eyes were no longer the soft hazel shade they had always been. They were black, not just dark, voids, depthless, empty pools that absorbed the dim light. And yet, he was smiling. Ethan recoiled. No. Oliver reached up, tiny fingers curling around Lillian's wrist, and his voice, no longer a child's, whispered, "You took what was never yours." Lillian screamed. Ethan lunged, instinct taking over. He tried to pry Oliver from Lillian's grasp, but the baby's small hands were strong, unnaturally so. Then, Oliver's mouth twisted into something inhuman, lips stretching too wide, teeth growing sharp. A sudden howl shattered the air. The wolves. Ethan turned toward the sound, heart hammering. The pack had returned, emerging from the shadows of the trees, their fur bristling, their fangs bared. But they weren't alone. An old woman stood among them. Her eyes were milky white, her face lined with age, wrapped in a cloak of dark, matted fur. She raised a withered hand, and the wolves immediately stilled. The forest fell deathly silent. Ethan panted, his grip still locked on Oliver. He could feel the child's body trembling, shifting, changing. The woman stepped forward, her voice rasping like dry leaves. "You have meddled with ancient laws, child of men." Her gaze flickered to Lillian. "You stole a life that was never yours to take." Lillian shook her head violently, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't know, I didn't." The woman's expression darkened. The forest knew. The wolves knew. And now, the balance must be restored. She pointed a long, bony finger at Oliver. Lillian sobbed. "Please, he's our son." The woman shook her head. "He is ours." Ethan gritted his teeth. "There has to be another way." The woman studied him for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. "There is." Ethan swallowed hard. "What is it?" The woman's gaze pierced through him. "A trade." The words sent an immediate chill through Ethan's body. Lillian clutched Oliver, eyes frantic. "A trade?" The woman's voice was eerily calm. "The child was taken. A soul must be given in return." Ethan felt the weight of the words press down on him like lead. Lillian's face twisted in horror. No, there has to be another way." The woman simply waited. The wolves remained motionless, watching, their eyes glowing in the dark. Ethan turned to Lillian. His hands trembled as he reached for her, cupping her face. "If we don't do this, he won't be ours anymore." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "I can't lose you." Ethan swallowed the lump in his throat. "You won't." Then, before she could stop him, he turned back to the woman. "I'll take his place." Lillian screamed, clutching at his arm, but the old woman had already moved. She raised her hand, and an unseen force wrenched Ethan backward. Darkness swallowed him whole. He barely heard Lillian's cries as the world twisted around him. The laughter from the forest grew louder, morphing into whispers, sighs, screams, and then silence. 1 year later. Lillian sat on the porch of the cabin, staring into the trees. The wind was soft, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. Oliver played at her feet, his laughter sweet and innocent. His eyes, hazel once more, shined in the sunlight. She ran a hand through his hair, heart aching. A shadow moved between the trees. Lillian's breath hitched. A figure stood at the forest's edge, tall, silent, watching. It never came closer, never spoke. But she knew. Ethan had kept his promise. He was still there, still watching over them. And the wolves. They no longer howled at night, because the debt had been paid. The end